That's asked by many, many learned people, and it's strange because the answer eludes most of them. But they all ask, wait a minute, the whole world was created for the Torah, correct? Yes. The Torah says that the whole essence of all creation is the Torah. You see. In the beginning, God saw that Klal Yisrael would eventually take the Torah, so He created the world. But wait a minute, when was the Torah given? The Torah was not given to Adam. The Torah was not given to Noah. The Torah was not given to Avram. The Torah was finally given to the Anochim all the way down, 2,000 years down after the creation of the world. So wait a minute, if the whole world is sitting on Torah, what did the first 2,000 years do? What did the first generation of Shloshim and Anochim do without a Torah? How can there be an existence of man without a Torah? How is that possible? Because the Torah was given in Har Sinai. What is the obvious answer? What's that? But the Torah was given in Har Sinai. No?
That was the Torah. It was the Torah at that point, and it was the Torah.
Right. Because in essence, what is the Torah really? The Torah is not something that was given in Har Sinai really. That's not what it is. The Torah is basic, it's 650 mitzvahs. But what are the mitzvahs? The mitzvahs are the sphere of creativity. All we see from Adam down to what? To Moshe, to Mount Torah, is nothing more than alterations on the sphere of creativity. But the essential idea always remains the same, doesn't it? The Monarchy is always concerned to see what are you going to do in terms of your free will. So what's the difference if I have one mitzvah, or if I have 7, or if I have 613? The essential idea is what the mitzvah is about. A mitzvah is a specific type of activity which essentially serves as a focus of free will. To choose between whether or not you will accept God's will or you will insist on what? On carrying out your own will. That is the basic definition of a mitzvah. And that's what the Torah is. The Torah is nothing more than a what? It's nothing more than the description of those mitzvahs. The only thing is, and the strange thing, the reason why it's so what? It's the reason why it's confusing is because we seem to only call the 613 mitzvahs the Torah. We don't call the first bunch of mitzvahs that were given to mankind, we don't call that the Torah. But in essence it is the Torah. It's not called the Torah because for some reason it lacks certain final form. But in essence it's exactly the same thing. That one mitzvah given to Noah, Adam Rishon, was the entire Torah, wrapped up in one mitzvah. But here we see a very critical thing about the structure of a mitzvah and the structure of a person. That basically, who determines what a Torah will look like? You do. Exactly. You decide, you tell God what that Torah will look like. That sounds an incredible concept. It's almost like we thought that the Torah was 630 mitzvahs and that's the fait accompli, that's what we have to do. No, that's not true. Your basic structure tells the Punisher what he should do for you. Adam Rishon was of such enormous power, of such enormous strength, that the entire Torah was wrapped up in one deed. It was all in that one deed of the Eitz HaDaas Torah. When the Punisher says, don't eat from that tree of knowledge of good and evil, that was the Torah. Why? Because it was the nature of man, the nature of the neshama, that the structure of the neshama was an exact counterpart or parallel to the structure of the mitzvah at that time. When he failed, what happened? Humanity was altered. If humanity is altered, that means that what? That means that the Torah must be altered. Now there's another medrash that says that Avraham Avinu knew the entire Torah. That's what it says. And he observed the entire Torah. And the obvious question is, how do you figure out the entire Torah? And what is it when he knew the entire Torah? Now, I'm not going to go into the depths of it. We'll go into a little further on. But what Avram understood was this. And Avram knew how to figure out. He knew how to study the structure of men at that point to understand what the Torah will look like at a different time. Because he knew the rules. He knew the structural variation between the Shema and Mitzvah. And by knowing the way these two vary, he was able to understand what kind of neshama will happen and what a Torah will look like. Hence he knew in advance what the 613 mitzvahs would be like. So this is a strange thought. Are there any questions?
Did Abraham write down the mitzvah?
No.
It was from divine inspiration.
Well, that and other things. We're going to get into in the future share, but...
And when did he get the divine inspiration?
What's that?
When did that happen?
In his lifetime. He was able to... how he figured it out is very interesting. I don't want to go into it in detail, but Avram was able to figure out what the Torah would be like because he understood the whole subject of magic and witchcraft and all the black arts. Yes, that's where it comes from. He knew from the other side. The way we understand what the Torah is by understanding the Yetzer Hara. It's from the Yetzer Hara that he got the Torah from. Because it's the answer, exactly. We will get in detail. We'll explore how that's done. I don't know how he did it, but we'll explore some of the principles of that. But that's it's an incredible thing. But even further. Okay. Yes. Okay.
What's the significance of 613?
Well, you're right. It is an issue, but it has to do, 613 very briefly, it has to do with the way the neshama is fragmented, distributed. A neshama that's created has 613 parts, or 613 different aspects of it. And a mitzvah given to each one of those aspects. So that if the person keeps that mitzvah, then he invigorates or sustains one part. You see, each mitzvah contrasts to a specific chelek or part of the neshama. If he does a chet or he transgresses, then he causes harm to that chelek. Now, why is the number 613 that I'm not clear on? Why that very peculiar number, 613? But it corresponds to the chelek of the neshama in its ultimate sense. But not all of those aspects are always visible, so that in other Mauritians, one mitzvah alone was able to direct all 613. Okay?
It's not that his neshama was different?
No. Well, it was different. But it has to do how to access all these different parts. But that really goes off with the thing. I just wanted to just quickly mention that in terms of this. Okay, let's go on. Okay, let's go into some aspects of din. How does din operate? How does justice operate? As we have said before, essentially, what din does is create one of two states, either kiyum or ibud. Either it sustains self or it annihilates self. One of the two. Now, I'm going to do something which really is not part of what we're going to somewhat deviate slightly. We're going to continue in the subject of din, you see. But I want to discuss now how din or justice operates with us now. This is not the way it operated at the beginning of creation. Okay? But first I want to discuss some general idea how it operates with us, so you'll understand some of the manifestations of it. And then we'll go back and begin to see how it operated then. As I've said, and it's very important to remember this, that ultimately what din is nothing more than either kiyum or ibud. Because din or mishpat, justice, is connected to creativity of self. It's the same thing. The laws of justice are synonymous and identical and follow from the laws of the existence of self. We will present a somewhat different picture of din as it has been altered to all the different generations to see how it applies to us. We have 613 mitzvahs. We have 613 mitzvahs. If we have 613 mitzvahs, when a person lives his entire life, by the time he finishes, he will have done many mitzvahs and he will have done many sins. How does God judge him? What does he do? If the essence of mishpat, din, is annihilation or continuity of self, how does this apply to a person who has multiple mitzvahs? You see, so that in your lifetime there will be thousands and thousands of mitzvahs and thousands of chatoim. So what does the Hashem do? So essentially, one of the things that he does is the following. He will look at the sum total of all the mitzvahs. That doesn't mean he will look at the sum total of the quantity. He will look at the sum total of the quality of those mitzvahs. Because you can do one mitzvah, for example, on the different degrees of mysterious nefesh, or different degrees of effort. For example, if somebody, let's say a man, wants to learn Torah, and he happens to be a poor man, for him to sit and learn would require enormous effort and a lot of mysterious nefesh, sacrifice, wouldn't it? But let's say that person was very rich. For him to sit and learn is a much easier thing. So therefore the same mitzvah with respect to one is totally different than with respect to the other. You cannot compare the two really, even though they may be the same type of mitzvah, but qualitatively they're not the same. So that you always must take into account not only the actual deed itself, but all the other variables that come into practice. In terms of how much sacrifice was involved in this mitzvah. And sacrifice is essentially an outgrowth of will. And that's the key thing. It's not the action or the event, it is also the manifestation or the intensity of will. And the intensity of will is always judged by mysterious nefesh, the amount of sacrifice that a person does to do a mitzvah. How much will you sustain to be from? For example, you find many Yitzharas. It's very hard to be from. Very hard to keep kosher. Very hard to do Shabbos. Very hard. It's very difficult. People around you just don't do it. You got to do this. You got to do that. There's a tremendous effort here. Well, if you exert an effort against these things, that's an exertion of mysterious nefesh. You see, so that the Buddha looks and sees what exertion is there. To what extent does this person want to do what I say? And when you exert yourself in the beginning, the Buddha always makes it harder. Always. so that the threshold is greater. But what happens is that if you begin to exert yourself, it becomes easier. So what happens is the Baruch begins to allow it to give way. At first you come over to the door, you want to open the door, it's locked. You can't open the door. You kick the door, you bang the door. After a while the Baruch says, I see that this person really wants to do it. This person really wants to be a Shomer Shabbos. So what I'll do, I will unlock the door, but I won't open it. So the person bangs on the door because he thinks it's still locked. And then one day you realize, wait a minute, the door's open. And suddenly, everything becomes much easier. There are many, many levels, therefore, of exertion, and there are many, many levels of hashgacha that the Baruch Shem does. So what you find is that every one of you, everyone, is in a constant interaction with the Baruch Shalom. Directly. The Baruch Shalom addresses himself to every one of you in this room and everyone in Klal Yisrael individually. Reads your mind, sees what your will is, and he creates a whole series of opportunities for you with a given level of resistance, and then he says, choose. So suddenly your entire life exists with a certain continuum or array of a series of choices. Each one of those choices is specifically designed for you. It's designed for your intellectual level. It's designed for your how much knowledge you have of Judaism. It is also designed for how much effort you have and what the threshold of pain is that you can tolerate. You see. Then he sees what you do. If you move in his direction, he begins to alter or reshape the circumstances so that the opportunities begin to change. If you continue moving in his direction, he continues to alter it. So that what you find yourself growing in what? In your ability to relate to the Baruch Shalom. It becomes easier, but only because you've exerted effort along the way. You see, so that he gradually, as you push forward, he gradually moves back. And he drew you closer to him. Let's say Chas v'Shalom, a person doesn't do that. A person pushes in the other way, so then he can choose in different ways. He can do several different things. He can suddenly block your path to move away from him, and so that you wanted to do something which is against the Torah, and suddenly you can't do it. So he blocked your effort. Or if he suddenly allow you to do it, you see, and slowly let you get away with it, but suddenly, at a certain point, you fall into a ditch. And then suddenly you turn around and there's the opportunity to do a mitzvah again. So what the Baruch Shem is doing is constantly interacting with you every second of your life in terms of these mitzvahs. So mitzvahs can never be judged by quantity. It's only quality. So what the Baruch Shem does is essentially take a readout, if I may use the term, of all the qualitative aspects of your mitzvahs in your entire life. Year 1, year 120. You've lived to 120. Okay? And the Baruch Shem looks at the sum total of all the mitzvahs. Now, there is a certain basic threshold. And the first threshold that we come to is called the conditioned or the circumstantial threshold. That's my word. Essentially in Hebrew is referred to the concept of masas, meaning that the Baruch Shem sees the majority of your deeds. You see, that's one way to judge it. The Baruch Shem looks at the overwhelming majority, what the majority of your deeds are. And let's say you've done, let's make it very simple, okay? It's much more complicated this, but let's make it simple. Let's say that you have been relatively decent and 75% of your activities have been good and 25% have been not so good. Okay? There are 75% mitzvahs, 25% chatonim. Now, what the Baruch Shem then does is look at a certain minimal threshold. There is a minimal existential threshold, which means that if you don't go beyond it, you suffer annihilation. Why? Because if you do not accumulate the minimal number of mitzvahs, now I don't mean quantity, again, I'm talking about in your entire interface with God, based on everything that you are, your knowledge, your wisdom, your past experience, everything, in all your lives, so whatever the situation is, if you fall below a certain minimal threshold, which let's say is here, everyone from here to here, right, is annihilated. Minus. Why? Because if you've fallen below this threshold, you will not have the ability to draw down the Kedusha to transform your section of the world. You will not be able to create an Olam Haba. You see, you will therefore annihilate yourself. Do you understand that? There is a circumstance, a master threshold. It is the minimal level of a person. What is that threshold? I don't know. No one knows. But that is an enormously terrifying threshold. Because below that threshold, you are doomed. And I hate to be so graphic, but that's really what it is. If you go beyond that threshold, you see, what happens is that you are then considered to continue your existence. And you go on, and therefore you then continue to exist. But how much do you continue to exist? That depends on the sum total of all your maisim, or all your mitzvahs. So that in this individual, who is 75%, let's say the minimal threshold is 5%. Then this person is 70% further than that threshold. So what it is, he can easily accumulate what he has to accumulate. Easily. And now that, his chelik in Olam Haba is bad. Because 75% is not bad. You see. But the first thing that God looks at is what's called the existential decision. Is this person to be kept, sustained in existence, or is he to be annihilated? That's the first question, and that is the main question, because that's the essence of din. Din, the first thing that din must determine is, do you survive or not? Din is essentially an existential affair. It creates and destroys being, self-being. That's all it really does. So that's the first question which must be addressed. Now, the problem is the following. What happens to other 25% of transgressions, of chatonim? What do we do with that? Should we just forget about it? Can we forget about it? No, we can't forget about it. Because din, or true justice, demands retribution for every deed. Because in doing these 25%, you did certain damage. So it cannot go unanswered. So therefore we must deal with this 25%. Why? Because the nature of justice is that everything you do must be answered. Everything. Why? Because you are a creator. Because everything you do is created. You are a God in that sense. Hence, everything you do is a creative consequence. You can't ignore 25% because there's a real 25% of black on you. So you can't ignore it. There's a real existence here. It must be dealt with. So what the punishment does is the following. So justice demands this. Why? Because if this neshama was put into Olam Haba, it could not sustain Olam Haba with the 25% against it. That tumah which resides on the neshama as a result of this 25% will impede its efforts to really enjoy or appreciate Olam Haba. Now Olam Haba is a place of total shleimus, perfection. It means Olam Haba is a place where you either exist or you don't exist. There are no in-betweens. Olam Haba, which is the future world, is only ruled by justice. There is no mercy in that world. Only in this world is there mercy. Remember, Rahmanas only exists here, not there. All that exists in Olam Haba is din. You get what you've worked for, what you've earned. Not a dime more, not a dime less. And it has to be like that, because that's what Nam L'Ksuf is. Nam L'Ksuf is your demand to the Baruch Shalom that you get what you've worked for, and that you participate in the creation of your Olam Haba. And that's exactly what Olam Haba is. Olam Haba is based on Nam L'Ksuf. Hence, Olam Haba is the result of your creation, neither more nor less. Only existence and non-existence is in Olam Haba. Existence means total ecstasy to whatever degree you've earned. That's what existence means in Olam Haba. Existence in Olam Haba means that you will be allowed to enjoy fully that which you have created. No more, no less. But you will be able to enjoy it without discomfort, without pain, without even the awareness of that existence of pain. There is not the slightest pain in Olam Haba. As I once told, I said this quite a while back, what is pain? If somebody puts his hand in his pocket to take out a coin, a quarter, and instead he took out a dime, that is pain. The sages consider that pain. That's right. If a person, like I said, wants to cross the street, and as soon as he gets to that street, there's a red light that just came on as soon as he walks, that's pain. That's Yisurin, and it's coming from the Baruch Shalom. To that degree, the slightest frustration of your desire is pain. And the Shemayim considers that pain. Heaven considers that pain. And it's given for a purpose. It's not random. It's not ineffectual. So therefore, in the Olam Haba, there must be an existence where there's not the slightest iota of even that. How are you going to do that? With this 25% on him, this tumah on him, there's no way that he's not going to experience pain. So this must be removed. How is it removed? How is tumah removed? Through either the man successfully did what? Tshuva. If he repents and attempts to rectify that, then that will remove it to a large extent. But if he doesn't do tshuva, then this must be removed another way. And the other way is Yisurin, sorrow, suffering, trouble, problem. So therefore the Baruch Shalom looked at his deeds and he said, well, this guy is coming out with a 75% effort here, but I see 25% over here which will interfere according to the laws of din, according to the laws of existence, according to the way that Olam Haba, according to the shlemus or perfection of Olam Haba, it's going to interfere. I've got to get rid of the 25%. And I see he's not doing tshuva about it, so I've got to give him a certain measure of suffering. Now, where will I do it? So the Baruch decides that he will do it in this world, in Olam Haba. And from this we see an amazing, amazing thing. That there are two functions to Olam Haba, this world. One function is to see what kind of accumulation the person develops. Hence the essential function of Olam Haba is opportunity, or the ability to exercise free will. That's the first function. And the second function is to remove the 25%. So that we establish what's called a homeostasis of din. Because in Olam Haba, if there is 75% and a 25% tumah, then the perfection of din is altered, is shaky. In order to see to it that justice is perfect and existence is perfect, there is a big problem with equilibrium. This must be eradicated. Homeostasis, of the perfection of din, must be established. That must be removed. And the Baruch decides that this world will serve the function of its removal. So suddenly you see a person who may be a very, very big tzaddik. He's a tzaddik, and he has a lot of bad problems. And that's what's called in the literature, tzaddik versus wallow. That's the famous statement. The man is a tzaddik, but he's got a hard life. And everyone says, Why does this guy have such a hard life if he's such a tzaddik? Right? It seems to be against justice, doesn't it? That's the answer. Tzaddik Lalo means that it's true. Most of the deeds that he's done will earn him a very great chilek, rewards in the world to come. But something has got to be done with the minority, with a small amount of tumah gathered. And the Buddhism says that will be done here. So the 25% must be erased here. Do we understand that? Do we understand why it must be erased? It must be erased so that his existence in Olam Haba is irreproachable. It is pure, it's the existence of pure soul with no tumult, no pain, or any kind of discomfort. Yes?
The pain that the tzaddik goes through, is that due to his own misdeeds?
At this point
in his
it is.
life? So if he's such a tzaddik, then he's not such a tzaddik.
No, if a person who is a tzaddik is not necessarily one. You think a tzaddik is somebody who never sinned in his life.
No,
that is not a tzaddik.
25%
Please.
is a lot.
But
For righteousness.
no. A tzaddik is someone who has sinned plenty. Somebody who has never sinned is a malach, is an angel. A tzaddik is someone who has loads of sins. But a tzaddik is someone in the balance. You look at the totality of his existence. That's what a tzaddik is. And when you look at the totality of his existence, you see that this man really tried. And he did a very good job. But of course, there are ways that he failed. But he is still a tzaddik. That is the real meaning of a tzaddik. It's not some exalted saint that's some on some kind of ivory tower in some saint. That's not a tzaddik. Like I said, that's a malach. There are only 4 men in all existence who never sinned. And that's it. There are only 4. Everyone else has done a decent job of it in some way or another. And that's what it is. What the Bernisham is concerned now that your life is constructed with more than one mitzvah. You see, Adam only had one mitzvah. So there's only one mitzvah to determine whether he's a tzaddik or Rasha. You make it, you're tzaddik. Don't make it, you're Rasha. And that was it. Adam was a Rasha. Really, because he failed the one opportunity. But once the Buddhism changed the condition, once the Buddhism altered the position of Torah so that there's many, many mitzvahs now, the concept of tzaddik and Rasha is also altered. So that it is now a total view of what a person is, not a specific view of certain mitzvahs. You see? It doesn't answer your question.
Well, kind of.
Okay.
So the trials that one encounters in life, is that due to their own hate, or is that due to just all these tests?
That depends. It depends. It depends. I'll explain to you. It depends. Since the function of Olam Hazeh is what? Is to provide 2 objectives. 1, to create opportunities for free will, and number 2, to remove the minority, the minority of Chatonim that you did, let's say. How do you tell what is happening to you? That's very difficult. It's not easy. You see, it's not easy to do that. But everything in your life, in one way, fulfills one objective or the other. But even more than that, everything in your life is a combination of both. So that very rarely will you find some event in your life which is totally free of free will or totally used to serve this function of removing tumah. Let me just explain. If an event happens in your life which has to do with free will, right, it is an opportunity for free will. But when God performs something in your life that has to do with this function of removing tumah, or rather, creating the perfection of justice in the next world, if that's the thing, in that specific event, you have no free will. Do you understand? It depends on the objective of the event. If the event relates to free will, so if the event relates to a mitzvah, or what the Buddha wants to see what you will do, you will have free will. If the event is not coming because of mitzvah, it's coming because the Buddha is trying to erase the imbalance then in that particular event, you will be forced to behave in a certain way. You will either, whatever it is, if the Baruch decides you should get sick, lose your job, lose some money, get into a car accident, whatever the story is, lose a couple of bucks, whatever the thing is, that will happen to you against free will. It will happen to you, and you have no choice. Yes, you can do tshuva. You can do tshuva. But if you don't, then these things will impinge on your life against your free will. You see. Now, wait. Here we see a very, very deep thing, which no one's really observing. But it is an astonishing thing taking place in front of our eyes over here. Because we see a total alteration of the concept of din. Really. What am I talking about? As I have explained to you before, din is only involved in either continuing the self or discontinuing it. That's it. Who is doing this? Din has nothing to do with erasing. Din doesn't erase anything. Din is only concerned with this. Din is concerned with telling you whether you will exist or not in time. But what's going on over here? In order to perfect the judgment in the future world, suddenly there's a whole new type of process coming into being, where what's happening is that the tumah that you've created because you're sinning is being erased. So we see an amazing thing. In here, din applies to the individual or the self. Here it applies to the deed or the event. You see the difference? That's an amazing alteration. That has never existed. Because the truth is, din only has an ability to address the self or to address your existence. It can say nothing about certain deeds that you did. What happens is the Baruch says that you have a painful existence in Olam Haba. But we got to get rid of the 25%. What do we got to get? Who's going to get rid of the 25%? Whoever is getting rid of the 25%. Din only says get rid of them person or don't get rid of them. Because din emanates from the internal creativity of the self. When you think get rid of this, you're looking at din not in terms of the massive or the internal condition of a person, but you look in terms of individual effects that he happened to do. You are treating these events as if they were separate themselves. You see, that you just want to get rid of the tumah. So you're not dealing with self. You are dealing with simply with the effects themselves. So that Kiyum and Ibud do not apply to self, but Kiyum and Ibud apply to the specific, particular deeds of a person. So therefore the Baruch is what? Is really using two different rules. When it comes to these deeds, he's saying these deeds create a matzah. They create an eternal condition of either existence or annihilation. But when it comes to these deeds, we have a whole new principle. What is it? These deeds will simply have to be removed in and of themselves. That's a very strange form of din. Do we get that? Or that slip us? The way we have understood din or justice, the same thing. Basically, din is a statement about what will happen to you as a person. It says you will either continue to exist or you will be annihilated. That's all it says. So therefore, the Baruch should look at all your mitzvahs and simply say, let's what? Let's see whether or not this person, this self, will continue to be or not. And that should be the end of it. If he looks at all these mitzvahs and says, well, I think you've done a great job, so you will stay in Olam Haba. And to someone else he says, I think you've done a horrible job, you will be annihilated. That's all din really says. But what we see here is a very strange thing. We see here that Din not only says, in this case, where he's done 75% mitzvahs and 25% failures, chatoim, that Din not only says that we keep this man in Olam Haba, but that we remove these chatoim, we remove these effects. These individual effects are not considered part of the total, you see, but rather we will isolate them as a separate thing and remove that. But the truth of the matter is that according to the laws of din, or creation itself, did the person create these things? He did. So that in some way this should diminish that. In some way it should be held against him in some very powerful way. The Buddhism shouldn't go ahead and say, well, let's give him some suffering and let's erase it. What do you mean let's give him suffering and let's erase it? There's no secondary conditions here. If the man did 75% mitzvahs, give him this amount of Olam Haba. If he did 25% bad, then let's erase the 75% or erase part of it. You see, whatever the situation is. In other words, let both of these things determine whether or not this person will survive and how he will survive. And that's it. But the Buddha says, I want to get rid of that. Really. I want to get rid of that. I want to annihilate this thing. I want to get rid of these deeds as if they never happened. That's what the Buddha says. I want to get rid of these deeds as if they never happened. So I'll put the man through some suffering and I'll erase it. And that's it. But that's a very, very strange form of din. Because usually din, or justice, goes after the self. It doesn't go after the individual deeds as such. So we find that justice is used in two ways. That it is possible for din to annihilate self, but we also have a new kind of mitzvah, a new kind of mishpat rather, a new kind of mishpat or din, which will annihilate the deeds themselves and leave the person intact. That's what we see. This comes from Achronis. The ability of din or justice to annihilate certain things that you did without touching your existence is a new thing. That's a new form of din, a new form of justice. You see, it says, I will let you survive and I'll get rid of some of the bad things you did. With other missions, normally din doesn't have that ability. Din goes after you because it comes from you. If you've chosen non-God, if you've chosen that, you will be annihilated. If you've chosen to what? To submit to the Buddhism's will, you will remain in existence. That's what Din says. Din only questions and simply says whether you will continue to survive or not. But we find that the Buddhism employs Din, or justice, also to get rid of certain mitzvahs, certain chatoim, and clean them out, which is a new concept of din, because what din is doing now is looking not only at the person's survival, but also at certain particular deeds that he's done, and dealing with that separate from the person's survival. What's that? Who? Yes, no, not. No, the Jewish Rava is a whole different thing. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop here. Okay? I'm going to stop here. We will continue this next time when we analyze what happens to the man who had 75% bad deeds and 25% good deeds.
And are these only physical?
No, mental, everything, every act that you do. Okay. Some very critical concepts. We analyze the movement of the history of the world from Adam until Abraham to understand the essential structure of humanity as a whole, and where the essential objective of humanity was, and how it ties in with the different sections of history. Now, when we spoke last time about Adam and Noah, and these people, about the Jews and Goyim, and we showed that basically there were three different types of periods in human history. There was the period of Adam before he sinned, and then there was a period of Adam after he sinned, which was then the period of his toldos, his generation, that they would have to do what he failed to do. And then we said also that his toldos or his generation would have to accomplish what he failed to do in two parts. One part called the Shoresh, and the other part called the Anaf. The Shoresh meaning the root, and the Anaf meaning the branch. Now we said very basically the following, what this means. Adam had the power of reconstructing all of Olam Haba. When he failed to do that, that objective was given to the Torah, to his sons, the children, the generations. And the construction of Olam Haba would have to be done in two steps. Construction of the major elements by the Shoshim, through their avodah, through their mitzvahs, and construction of the minor elements, called the Anofim, with their avodah and their mitzvahs. Whereas Adam was supposed to construct whatever it was in Olam Haba, he was supposed to transform the aspect of physical reality that would create an Olam Haba. Adam was supposed to construct that in both major and minor components. But his children were not. The job was already divided into Shoshim and Anofim. We said that the Shoshim and Anofim did a very, very poor job. Just like Adam had failed, the Shoshim and Anofim had failed as well. And what the Bonisham finally did was that he saw that of all the Shoshim, only one Shurish succeeded in doing what he's supposed to do, and that Shurish was Avram. All the other Shoshim failed to construct the major components of Olam Haba. It's as simple as that. So the question is, well, now that the Shoshim have lined themselves up in such a way where only one has succeeded and 70 have failed, that would obviously affect the construction done by the Anofim. And that's exactly what happened. What the Bonishim says to Avram, since you are the only Shoresh that completes your Chelek, yours will be the only Anofim that will continue the construction of your Chelek. Everyone else, the Bonishim put on the side. And what finally happened was, all these other people lost their ability to construct anything, both major and minor components of Olam Haba. Hence they were totally deleted from Olam Haba. And that was the origin of what's called the Ummah Olam, the Goyim, or the nations of the world. So essentially, the Jews are descendants from Avram, or they are the Anofim of the Shurish who succeeded, and therefore we all have some kind of connection to Olam Haba, whereas all the other descendants from all the other Shoshim became Goyim, have nothing to do with Torah really, have nothing directly to do with Olam Haba. Instead, the Bonishim still continued to give them chesed, to do something kind for them, and he allowed them, through their efforts, to earn the maximum levels of Olam Hazeh. And the truth is, there are maximum levels of Olam Hazeh. Obviously, even Olam Hazeh is not a minimal point, because it seems to be that all of us seem to be running after in one way or another to Olam Hazeh. So this life and the physical aspect of it, obviously it's no small gift that he gave to God either. So this basically seems to be what had happened. Now the matter goes on further, that the Anofim even descended further to what's called primary and secondary Anofim, but we won't go into that. That's essentially what it is. We see from this the critical difference between a Jew and a Goy, that a Jew is an individual who has the capacity to relate to Olam Haba through transformation, and a Goy is an individual who does not. Number one. The second amazing thing that comes out is that the Goy, or the individual, the human being who cannot relate to Olam Haba, is the abnormal being. Because since Adam Rishon, the Buddha, when he created the human species, It is part of the essence of human being. Part of his neshama to have the ability to construct an olam haba. The fact that suddenly there was created a human being that did not have this ability was an incredible novelty. So if somebody asks you, was Adam Jewish, or was Noah Jewish, or was everyone before Mount Torah, were they Jewish? The answer is yes. In terms of the essences, they were Jewish. They didn't have the mitzvahs that we had. They only had 7 mitzvahs, and we have 613 mitzvahs. But in their essence, they were Jewish, because to be Jewish means to have the kedusha, the ability to transform this world. Okay, that's a quick synopsis. Any questions before we go on? Yes.
Does there have to be a trade-off between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba?
What do you mean by trade-off?
Well, we go and got Olam Hazeh, we got Olam Haba.
Yeah.
We can't touch Olam Hazeh. We take Olam Hazeh, we don't get as much Olam Haba.
No, it's not. There's no, it's no trade-off. It's not like you get Olam Haba, so forget it. You're going to be terrible at Olam Hazeh. That's not what it is. It's not what it is at all. What it means is that the hatzlocha. I mean, a Jew's hatzlocha is also can be an Olam Hazeh as well.
Does it affect it all?
No. Now, well, it does. We're going to get into that. It does. How does it affect? It does, to some extent, it can affect. We're going to go into that, into the interrelations of that. But I just make sure everyone has these basic ideas. Yes.
What about, we talked about the major aspect of Olam Haba and minor, that the Shirashim is the major.
And the Anosim. Very good. I'm using the term.
Right, the minor, whatever. Because Olam Haba is Olam Haba. I mean, what are the different aspects of Olam Haba?
Yeah, but there are major elements, just like in any particular circumstance, there are major features and there are minor features.
So are the major already there, and now we just have to fill in the...
Well, Avram, had constructed through his efforts the major features.
So that's
and they were there, that is already there.
Okay,
it's the minor features.
So if we are working on our minor features, it's still in
well, yeah, to work to construct the minor features, but the minor feature that you're working on is your essential connection to Olam Haba. Yes.
I think it's worth the statement today Olam has a person.
Oh, okay. I said this a number of times, but what we're saying is that even though the Goyim are only restricted essentially to Olam Hazeh, even though essentially restricted, the Goyim have the ability to acquire Olam Haba if they maintain their 7 mitzvahs in an exemplary fashion. So that even though the Goyim essentially condemn them to Olam Hazeh in terms of the Shroshim, but the Anosim can escape from that. There's an escape hatch. The Anosim can escape from that if they observe their own mitzvahs in an exemplary fashion so that they can get Olam Haba. But the Olam Haba of a Goy, in whatever fashion, in no way can ever be similar to that of a Jew. Because if he does get it, it's only in a certain sense, in a minimal level, in a different way. Okay, let's proceed on. Now I have a lot of interesting things on the board. I will try and cover some of these concepts, some more, some less. But what is critical is that we will have a much clearer understanding of the nature of the concept of din. What is my objective at this point? My objective at this point is to understand what happens to the Goyim. We will be spending the next 4 or 5 weeks on Goyim. Now you may say, well, why are we spending that? Because we have to understand, essentially, what the nations of the world are about in their general and particular aspects. This is very necessary because in some way, even though the destiny of Goyim and the destiny of Jews were differentiated, ultimately that destiny again will interface. And the interface is extremely deep. how we interface. Because we begin to interface with them in ways that are very hidden and very dark. And that's the entire explanation for the exiles, the Golos, and all the problems the Jews have with Goyim towards thousands of years. But it's based on a whole different set of principles. But what I want to understand, my objective is to understand what is the inner essence of a Goy. How is he constructed? How does a person construct a being such that all of a sudden, no olam haba? What happens? So I want to look at it now from a pneumistic angle. Pneumis means interior or internal aspect. But before we can understand it from an internal angle, we have to understand the concept of din, or justice. So we're going to learn a great deal about how God judges the world. And I think there will be a lot of very interesting revelations, because all of this is immensely relevant to every one of you. First, the critical idea. We started last week, but it's something that you must realize. What is that? Everything that God created, everything, exists. Why? Because God gives it existence. He created it. God is the only one who can create in any sense of the word. God is an absolute master of existence because He is the process itself. So God dispensed existence to whomsoever He wished. Once that existence was given, there must be a continuity of existence. So it's not that the Baruch suddenly said, let there be object X. God must continuously will that this object X remain in existence. Because as soon as His will is withdrawn, X becomes non-existence, is annihilated. So there's the creation and the maintenance of existence. In all the world, everything that was created is an object with respect to God. Meaning that you must wait for Him to give you existence. You depend on the continuity of your existence from Him. Is there anyone outside, in a sense, of that realm? Is there anyone who does not simply receive from God, but actually gives back to God? Well, technically that would be impossible. But there is one creature that not only is a receiver or recipient, but he actually has the ability to give back to God that which he never created. Now this is an astounding thought. That which the Baruch never created, we have the ability to return. That is the human being, the Adam. Why? Because one thing the Baruch says is the following: I have created you and I want to give you olam haba. You demand that olam haba be given on your own terms, because you are like me, so you demand to be what? A partner in the creative process. So what the Baruch says, I will allow you to be a partner, which means that I will allow you to have a creative capacity like me. But this is astounding. How can we create anything? The answer is we cannot. At least as far as existence is concerned. You cannot do a thing about existence. What do I mean? You can't lift your arm by yourself. You can't think a thought by yourself without God in some way creating the instrumentality or the intermediate vessels which will allow that thought to transpire. You cannot live for another second unless the Baruch allows and decrees your body to go on. So then how can we create? If we are so dependent on the Baruch, where is our creative mark? Because for us to create means that God has allowed us to exist in a sphere of some sort which is independent of Him. That's what it means to create. To create means that we have the ability to do something which He is not involved in, so that it is a completely original from us. We are true creators. In that sense, we are like true gods. Only in that sense. And that has nothing to do with existence, it has to do with will. That's it. Since the essence of a person, the essence of a neshama itself, is nothing more than the act of self-awareness, The only thing that a person can do on his own is be self-aware. I am, and I know that I am. That's all you are. But there's something else you can do. You can also say, I am, I know that I am, and I will. So what the Buddhism did was to create a choice. He created two circumstances, Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh. Or rather, he created a spiritual and a physical and put together and said, choose. And that choice is your creation, literally. Because the Buddhism does not force you to choose. You choose from yourself. And what you choose, you will live with. Free will. Now we began last week, but I want to explain clearly what free will is again. Free will means, very simply, free will means that if you are given a set of two circumstances, two opposing circumstances, and both have equal intensity in terms of their attractiveness, neither one of these two different directions will impinge on you, because they're both exactly equal. Hence, the final choice of which direction you take emanates purely from your internal being, not from anything external. Since the external directions are equal in intensity, they're both the same attractive, that means that the final decision is yours. Yours, who is you? The essence of the I in each one of you. It emanates from you. It has nothing to do with external reality. It cannot be predicted in advance by anyone, nor can it be interfered with by anyone in that sense. Well, once the Buddhism says that I will give you the opportunity to choose, nothing in all existence will interfere or exert any kind of pressure in that sphere or that domain called free will. So that if the Buddhism says, I give you the choice to either lift this bag or not, and for some reason the desire to lift it or not is exactly equal, the choice is absolutely yours. And it must emanate from the internal essence of yourself. It has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with existence. That's critical. And because of that, only God knows what you will do in advance. But He has nothing to say about what you actually will choose. You have the absolute control. Nothing in reality forces you to do that. Which means that you are like God with respect to Him in one way. Just like God created everything from nothing. Yesh me'ayin. Yesh me'ayin means everything from nothing. Meaning that God created this world without any kind of prior existence. Or from no other material. This world, the kind of existence that we see now, is a complete novelty. It has never existed before. In the world of God, in the world of Ein Sof, this kind of existence that we find does not exist. God created, He originated it from absolute non-existence. That is the power of a God. We have the same power with respect to free will, or with respect to choosing. When we say, I want this direction but not that, and the opportunity is there, that choice is a yesh me'ayin. It comes from nowhere. It comes from non-existence. Literally from non-existence. There's not a hint, or a hint, or a shadow, you see, of where that choice will come from, by virtue of anything in reality. It comes from purely from the inner domain of your essence. It is existence from non-existence. But that's the difference between us and God. God can create yesh me'ayin, existence yesh me'ayin. We cannot do anything with existence, but we can create will yesh me'ayin. We can choose, you see. We can't do anything, but we can say, I want this, but not that. That's why the Gemara says, famous statement in the Gemara, Hakol b'tei shemayim, everything is in the hands of heaven. Everything. Chutz, except Yirat Shemayim, except the fear of heaven. Everything is in the hands of God, except for the fear of God. Why? Because everything is existence, and all existence is in his control. There is one thing which is, in a sense, kaviyachol, outside of his control. It is. It's not outside of his awareness. But once he allows you to what? To express your free will, then it is outside of him, so to speak. How it's outside of him is unknown, and probably will forever remain unknown. Because how to reconcile his existence from ours is an extremely difficult thing to understand. But what the Bonisham says is, I guarantee you, I am not interfering with you. You are absolutely free agents. Therefore, your will is outside of him. Yira Shemayim, or the desire to choose God versus non-God, is totally dependent on you. And only on you. Your desire to be from or not, in a situation of 100% bechira. Now you have to remember that's a theoretical situation. Those situations don't exist anymore. There's only one man in all existence who has 100% free will. One man and one man only. And who is that? Adam Rishon. Adam was the only man who has 100% free will. Ever since Adam, that has never been the case. And what we find, oddly enough, that as mankind goes on in history, free will gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You see. We lose our free will as we continue to abuse it. And this is one of the fundamental aspects of justice. But that's the thing. At the point when you have 100% free will, it is totally free. That's why it says, "Hakol b'nei Shemayim chutz miyirah Shemayim." Except for the fear of heaven, everything is in the hands of heaven. If that's the case, if you are a God, and I will use that term, even though we will make no mistake to think that you are a God of existence, but you are a God of will, and I choose to call you that without making you too arrogant, because I want you to realize the enormity of your power. Then what happens if you choose against the Rebbeinu Shalom? What happens? As we have said, the immediate result of choosing against God, choosing the wrong direction, the immediate and only result that can ensue is annihilation. Absolute annihilation or extinction of the self. That's a very strange thing. Why is that? That is the concept of din. You see, it's a mistake. You think that the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I give you two choices, A or B. So, if you do A, which let's say he wants you to do, he gives you a pat on the back. If you do B, which he doesn't want you to do, you get a spanking. You think that's justice? You think that what? That essentially, if you do what he wants, he's going to reward you. But if you don't do what he wants, he's going to punish you. In true din, there is no such thing as reward and punishment. Those are infantile terms. A parent rewards and punishes. God does not reward and God does not punish. Why? Because God relates to you as another God, Kaviyachol, so to speak. You're not his child in that sense. You're not an object. You are a God of will. He is a God of existence. So what happens is he says to you, very simply, do my will and you will exist. Don't do my will and you will annihilate yourself. I will not annihilate you. I'm not going to punish you at all. But by the very laws of your own existence, you must become extinct. Why? For the following reason. If you choose to go against God and you choose yourself, you are in essence choosing a false God. You are making a God out of yourself. You're saying, wait a minute, I'm the important one here, I'm the one who's independent, I'm the one who can do what I want. So what you've created a false God. But how have you created? You have created a false God by entering into the domain of divinity itself. You have gone into yourself. You have gone into the world of non-existence, so to speak, and pulled out non-God. But that's an absurdity, that's an impossibility. How can you go into the world of non-existence where only God reigns? In God's world, in the Buddhism's world, there is only existence and non-existence. There are no other things. Now, even in this world, there is no such thing as non-existence as such, because the Buddhism exists. But only in his world can non-existence be truly understood. Since he is absolute existence, non-existence can only be compared to a state of absolute being. We don't know what it means to non-exist. You say, well, of course I know what non-existence means. Non-existence means not to exist. That's an absurdity, if you think. What have you just said? You said true non-existence is the absence of existence. But all you've done is think of existence, and you've said, negated it. You can't grasp non-existence. There's no one in this room that can grasp the real meaning or the essence or the real state of non-existence. That's impossible. All you do is grab existence in your head and say, not. Which means that the best you can relate to non-existence is by negating existence. That, the negative of existence, is not non-existence. Only an absolute being like the Buddhism can understand what non-existence means. Only him. So what you have done is go into that world of Ein Sof, because he's allowed you, because you are connected to the world of Ein Sof. You are connected to his domain through will, but not through existence, but through your will. And you've gone into that world and you've said, I choose non-God. I choose to create a false God. Well, to go into the absolute laws of existence itself, to go into that realm of Yesh Ma'ayin, and which a world where there's only the existence of God, and use that power to create non or false God, means that you've established a contradiction in your own existence. That contradiction instantly results in your annihilation. And it's not because the body can punish you. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the fact of who you are. Since the Buddhism made you a God, the Buddhism connects you or plugs you into the world of Yesh Ma'ayin. That's what it is. Because that's how high you are. Once you're plugged into that world, you see, to instantly do something or to instantly involve yourself in something which is not true, or means that you begin to relate to non-existence. So what you're doing is you're dragging the power of absolute existence to create non-existence. No such thing can be. Hence the contradiction is annihilated. It's like matter and antimatter. Instant annihilation. So the Buddhism does not relate with you as a parent at all. You are not a child, so to speak. You are not a little infant that doesn't know what's going to be. The Buddhism says, you are like me. Since you demanded such a thing, Nam Visufa, you are like me, and this is what happens. So therefore, that's what din is, or mishpat, justice. Justice refers to only two prerogatives. What's called kiyum meaning existence, or what's called ibud. Ibud is annihilation. These are the only two words in the vocabulary of justice. There's no such thing in justice, well, let's just punish him. Let's keep him around and give him a spanking. That is unknown in the realm of true justice. Because true justice emanates from creation. Justice is nothing more than the consequence of a creative act. And when God said you are creator, you create. Your creativity essentially involves yourself. What you make of yourself. That is the consequence. Hence, you determine the continuity of your own being. And that's it. But what you determine really happens. Why? Because you are a real Yesh Ma'ayin. It's not a joke. You are a real mini-God in that way. So you have the power to destroy or the power to create. But not anything in existence. Only yourself. Because you are only the God of yourself. You are the God of will, not existence. Hence the only thing you can create and destroy is the existence or continuity of that will, or that self. Strange, doesn't it? sounds very severe. But it is severe. It is severe because man is so great. If the Baruch Hashem had made you less, it would not be so severe. That's the choice. The Baruch Hashem could have made you into a being infinitely smaller in importance than He made you. But had He done that, then the free choice He would have given you, you would not have had free choice. Or whatever capacity you would have had would never result in such severe consequences because you would have been a very small being. Just like you punish, for example, an adult, totally different than you punish a teenager or a child. Why? Because you accept or you respect the fact that each one has different abilities, right? And therefore has different levels of responsibility. The reason why kiyum, existence, and ibud, annihilation, is the ultimate consequence is because the ultimate responsibility that you have is that of a creator. So therefore you must either create or destroy, because that is your essence. Yes, you have a problem?
Problem? Not necessarily. How do you explain that in a different kind of fashion to us, that a person can disintegrate and destroy his own self? Who says that a person has the right to do that?
I didn't say he has the right to do it. I said he has the ability to do that.
The ability, a person has the ability to destroy and to disintegrate many things.
No. The only thing that you can disintegrate or create is yourself. You have no ability to do anything else at all. Everything else is a mere illusion. You are not connected to anything.
But the fact that you're not awarded the right or merit within your realm to do that as well, so that also doesn't award you that choice. It doesn't award you that choice.
It doesn't what?
It doesn't award you that choice to your own self as well. The fact that a person there are certain rights that a person has to his own self as well.
Well, the Baruch Hashem says don't do it. The Baruch Hashem says don't do it. When Adam Rishon was first created, what did the Baruch Hashem say? Don't do it.
It's a question of don't do it. It's a question that a person...
That's what it is. Don't do it. Now, this is the way justice operates in its absolute form. But obviously, have we ever seen this kind of a consequence? Have we ever seen this kind of result? Have we ever seen really anyone annihilate themselves? No, not really. So obviously, somewhere along the line, the Baruch Hashem switched on Hobbes. Adam Rishon had 100% bechira, 100% free will. He failed. Was he annihilated? No. What happened? Because what the Baruch Hashem did, essentially, was to intervene into the demands of justice. What the Baruch Hashem did was the Baruch Hashem exempted Adam from the laws of his own existence. That's an astounding thing. And what is that called? What is the exemption from the laws of existence called? It's called rachamim, or mercy. You've heard the word before, but I think you'll begin to see what that word means. Rachamim doesn't mean the Baruch Hashem suddenly feels sorry for you. Rachamim means that the Baruch Hashem literally had to interfere and stop the laws of existence itself so that Mishpat doesn't manifest itself. That's what it took for the Baruch Hashem suddenly to be a malachim. That's an awesome thing. It's, for example, that the Baruch Hashem suddenly has to make what? A complete reversal of the laws of nature. That's what it is. It's the same thing. The Baruch Hashem established the laws of nature one way, and he intended the laws to be this way, and it follows its own structural integrity. And suddenly, the Baruch Hashem said, stop! No more gravity! No more... That's what it is. No more law of inertia. No more... Forget about about the three laws of motion. That's what it is. But what would happen if the Banisham stopped one of the laws of the universe? Well, the universe obviously will begin to what? Probably be destroyed. Because the reactions of that kind of thing would be enormous. The slightest change in one physical on the world could have incredible repercussions that we can't even begin to understand. Yet that's exactly what the Banisham did. The Banisham gave the Neshama then the ability to create, but not the ability to destroy. That's what Rahmanis is about. Half measure. Create but I won't let you destroy yourself. But what do you mean? If I can create, that same ability says that I can also destroy. You can't create something without having the ability of annihilating as well. If both of them flow through the same power. But that's what the Banisham did. The Banisham says create, but you will not be able to destroy, because that's what Rahmanis did. When it says in the Medrash that when God first created the world, He wanted to create the world through justice. But He saw what men would do, because He saw in advance where free will would lead. Yet He would not interfere with it. So He said, I will create the world not only with justice, but with mercy as well. But what did He do? That's a Medrash. It's a Medrash. But what does that Medrash mean? This is what it means. What it means is that when God created the world, man, Kaviyachol, is a God in will. Man has the ability to create and annihilate. And the Banisham says, I interfere with that ability, even though your own laws of your own existence demand, you see, the dual aspects. Now, how does man create? How? He creates by something called the mitzvot. Because when a person lives in this world, there are many things he has to do. He has to survive. He has a guf, right? So there are many things that he has to do just to survive. He has to forage for food. He has to involve himself. He has to get married or get a wife. I mean, he has to involve himself on all physical and psychological levels. That's what his guf demands. What does this have to do with God? Nothing. This has nothing to do with choice. So therefore, what the Banisham did was to essentially descend in certain areas of a man's necessary existence. And he said, do this but not that. Up to this point but not further on. So that what happened was, in the areas where he descended, or those specific activities in which he chose to what? To affect. He said that you can do this up to this point, but you can't go further. You can eat. You have to eat, because that's the way I created you. You must eat to survive. But I don't want you to eat anything which doesn't chew its cud and have a split off. You can eat other things, but I don't want you to eat something like that. So something what the Banisham did was take a necessary desire or drive and intervene in it in some way and begin to differentiate in that drive itself into two modes. That which is fine and that which the Banisham doesn't want. So the Banisham expressed his will in specific areas of your life. Now, once he expresses his will, what does that mean? What does it mean once he expresses his will? It means something extraordinary. It means that suddenly, when you begin to think of doing that which is not in your domain, or that which he doesn't want you to do, or whatever it is and so on, that means that suddenly the desire to do it puts you in a conflict between you and God, you see, automatically. And that's the conflict that the Banisham wants to see. Because that's the only area or sphere in which you can create. You cannot create in any other area, you see. The only areas of your life where you are like God, as I have described, is in the areas of mitzvahs. In all other areas, you have no free will. That means you do what He tells you to do, but you don't know it. See, we all have the illusion that when we get up in the morning to the moment we go to sleep, somehow our life is in our own hands and we control all our deeds. You don't. You only have a control, free will on those areas which in some way interface with a mitzvah. Anything which has nothing to do with the mitzvah, you have no free choice. You do as the Shemayim tells you to do. But the Baruch Hashem does not tell you that He's telling you to do it. You suddenly just feel like doing it, and you think it's your thought, or it's your idea. They hide their pressure. It's called a hashpor. A hashpor means an influence, or power. God sends out hashpor, or shefa. Shefa, power or influence. He sends it out to the world, and that shefa creates, maintains all existence, and keeps you doing everything you do. Only in the area of mitzvahs, only in the area of mitzvahs is there no shefa. Why? Because God awaits your shefa. God awaits to hear what you tell Him. So there is no shefa. There's nothing coming down. Nothing. In the sphere of creativity, in those activities which involve mitzvahs, nothing comes down. The Baruch Hashem waits to see what comes up. That's why the shefa goes in two directions. If the shefa is going down to you, you have no free will. You must do what that shefa said, even though it is a deception, even though it's an illusion. But there are areas in your life when there is no shefa coming down. He is waiting to see what you will do. And what you will do is a yesh me'ayim. And that determines the mishpat. So therefore we see, interestingly enough, that it is the mitzvahs which are the sphere of activity. And it is the mitzvahs, or in that sphere of creativity, where you manifest the yesh me'ayim free will. Only in that area. And that means that the shefa comes from you up, not vice versa.
According to your words, what does it mean that man creates worlds, designs worlds, and he destroys them? Bona olamos v'machriba. And besides that it's, how would I interpret it? If your sins will be like these years that are orderly designed and revised, then there's a certain kind of a forgiveness or repentance or kapara.
And your question is what? Why does it say man creates worlds and destroys worlds?
Man creates worlds. Now, if you say that a person is within his own domain and he can create himself and destroy himself, okay, that's one point. But a person creating himself and destroying himself and swinging from one extreme to another with himself is actually, in a certain way, destroying certain worlds and creating certain worlds which were given in his domain. Like certain worlds, a person rules over certain worlds. Like it's written in the Shekinah and all the other, it's fine. So, but the worlds that are given to a person is not necessarily his. It may be given in his own rights to deal with them, but they're not his, they're God's world. They're in God's domain, they're not in his domain.
But he has the power. That's the power of his creativity or annihilation. He has the power to either create or destroy himself and the worlds which are connected to him. And that's all. Whatever's connected to him, he was given that power. That's where his domain is.
But that's not himself.
Who is it then?
That's part of it's part of its existence that.
But the Baruch Hashem ties that existence to him, and it says, "I allow the continuity of these worlds to be in your hands."
That's what it is. Connection.
What's that?
The worlds that are given within the possession of man are not in its complete possession.
What do you mean by possession?
To rule over them, to destroy them, and to revive them.
He has that ability because the Baruch Hashem gave him that koyach. He doesn't have the ability from anything that he's done. I mean, there's nothing intrinsic in the man that has the ability to create or destroy other worlds outside of himself. But he has the ability in terms of self to annihilate and destroy that which the Baruch Hashem connected to him.
But those worlds are outside of himself. They're only
that's not so simple. That's a very interesting point. That's on a deeper level. That's not true. It's really not true.
What do you think?
I don't want to go into that now, but that's not necessarily true. Because the question here is the very nature of the self, and what is the relationship of the self to all existence. That's not as simple as it sounds. There's a great deal of existence which is tied into the neshama.
That's true.
Much more than because it's tied into the very essence of self. That's in it, but it's in it. I don't want to go into that.
Not in complete ownership as man himself.
It's much deeper than that. It's much deeper than that. But I don't want to go into that. It would be quite an advanced thing. Okay. So, what is the sphere of creativity, the mitzvahs? What are some of the features of mitzvahs? Well, first of all, the Buddha decided to what? To present certain aspects of a person's life with the pivotal focus of creation or annihilation. What is the structure of those activities? Well, we're not going to go into it completely, but basically, the Buddha set aside, first of all, certain kinds of activities that relate to your thinking, relate to your speech, relate to your activity, your physical activity. He set aside certain activities that relate to do and some don't. So you have what's called an essay, meaning a positive commandment, and a loiseh, meaning a negative commandment. The Buddha also indicated that he wanted these specific activities done more than once. And then finally, the Buddha also indicated that he wanted different kinds of mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs themselves have certain general properties. This is very important. We won't go into this in detail. But the fact that Adam was only